Welcome to Navigating Change, everybody, the podcast from Tybal Inc. I'm Pete Wright, and I'm here with the talented Gail Gregory. Hello, Gail.
Hey, Pete.
I love that we're doing this.
Me too.
Howard wasn't even invited.
No, he wasn't. Let's not tell him, though.
Didn't even tell him. Since he doesn't listen to the show because he thinks he's on every episode, he'll never even know we did it.
He.
We're going to be talking about presentation skills, and we've got clips and commentary and all sorts of good stuff coming up. But before we get into that, you can find out more about Navigating Change at tybalinc.com, where you can subscribe to the show by email in iTunes or your podcast app of choice, and find us on Twitter and LinkedIn, all that directly from tybalinc.com. We appreciate you joining the conversation there. But this week, we're talking all about presentations, and we're doing this because of your experience each year going into the NACUBO conference with the NACUBO Speakers Corner. The whole intent, so check me when I start lying, the whole intent of this is to help prepare folks to hit the stage at NACUBO. For people who are giving presentations, we want them to give their very best presentation that they possibly can. Am I right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's to enhance the audience experience as well as the speaker experience. You know, they want the speakers to feel successful and feel this was a really positive experience and want to do it again. And then, of course, the better the presentation, the better experience it is for the audience.
Right. The better reviews, the more likely people are to come back and see these presenters again. It's exactly the virtuous cycle. So What are the kinds of things that you run into in Speaker's Corner, the kinds of questions, if you could summarize sort of the bucket of questions that you get, as we're working with speakers getting ready for the stage?
I think they're probably a good way to put the buckets is the way that we've set up the webcast this year, where there could be questions on, like, I don't know how to get started, or, how can I really make my presentation focus on my audience? Or, okay, I've made my presentation, but, do you have feedback on how it could be better? And that could be related to the visuals or the content. And then finally, related to the delivery itself. How can I make the best delivery? How can I connect with my audience? What about my introduction? What about my closing? Those types of things. So it really runs the gamut. But I would say in terms of three buckets, it's creating, revising, delivering.
All right. Well, we're going to start walking through some sample presentations that we have culled together and share some of our thoughts on those presentations. Where would you like to start?
Oh, should we start with the worst or the best? What do you think, Pete?
I think let's start with the worst. Let's go ahead and set the bar as low as we possibly can.
Okay. So then, let's go with, we can play a bit of the worst presentation ever from Tripp and Tyler.
Quadruple checking notes as people file in, getting the computer ready, and asking everyone to take a seat. Pretending to click something on the computer to cover up the fact that I don't know what to do with myself.
Arriving just in time.
Wrapping up our conversation about a popular TV show we watched last night.
Disdain for popular TV show.
Mediocre icebreaker joke that doesn't quite land. Attempt to redeem myself by making fun of that guy.
Laughing at that guy.
Laughing because he's laughing and I like him.
Not laughing, and now checking out for the rest of the session.
Title, dramatic pause of my presentation.
Question about how long this session will last?
Annoyed, vague response.
Exaggerated eye roll.
Poignant quote from unknown philosopher to kick off presentation in dramatic fashion.
What I love about that one is how it's inside the person's mind. The thoughts that the person's having as they're in front of the room. I'm playing with my laptop. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what to say. So I love how it gets us inside the heads of the participants and the presenter. And I think that's one of the problems that people run into is when they're too much inside their head. where it's all about them and it's not about what's happening with the audience or how they're connecting with the audience. There's kind of that loop going on inside your head, and you really can't give a good presentation if you're stuck inside your head. So that's really what resonated with that one about me.
You know, for me, the piece that I think I really picked up was when we go back to the audience reaction, right? We get the same sort of experience where we're in the audience's head, but I love how they communicated the virality of response in the audience, that you have one person who's talking about a TV show and laughing and another person laughing at them laughing, and you really get to see that sort of network effect of how we feel about a presentation as it moves through the audience. And I think that's a real lesson we can learn for presenters, to just be aware of how one interaction with one person in the audience can really have an impact on everybody in the audience before too long.
Yeah, and and you can do that obviously in a positive way as well. Once you get one person contributing, one person with a comment, one person who answers your question, it just kind of builds on each other. And a way that I've found, and I want to hear what you think about this, Pete, a way that I've found to help myself with that is when you look out on your audience, there are, they're the people that are smiling and that are engaged. And then there are the people who are kind of, they could go either way. And then there's the folks who are, they're stuck in their iPad, or they are, they're really, really, really not present at all. And what can sometimes happen is you can feel yourself kind of, again, inside your head, like, why is that person staring at their iPad? Why are they on their phone? Why are they texting? Why aren't they paying attention? And you kind of focus on that. Whereas if you focus on those smilers and you start building off of that virality, as you put it, spreads from the smilers to the ones that are kind of on the fence. You may or may not ever get those iPad people to join you, but don't worry about them. Focus on the positive and how you can build on that throughout your presentation.
I absolutely agree. I think that's a key lesson, and I think it's something that many presenters forget, which is likely you alone are not going to be able to turn the tide for the individual bit of poison that's sitting in the audience, right? The one person who's there because they have to be there, or because they know they're going to get a CEU out of it, or whatever. Yeah. It is a rare presenter that can just wave a magic wand and turn that person around. But if you engage the people who are really positive and really supporting your message and want to hear from you, they're the ones who might be able to help turn that around through their energy and their positive responses to you.
Right. And, this actually reminds me of the clip I want to talk about next, and how one way to really grab your audience is through the use of stories, and most effectively through a personal story. And if I could just kind of set up the background on this one that I'll have you play next, it's Amy Cuddy at TED. And Amy, you may know of her work. She's the woman behind power posing. That idea that if you pose for 2 minutes, like in a Wonder Woman or this powerful stance before a job interview or before a presentation, that simply by doing that, it really impacts your body and your reaction, which can ultimately change your results. So it's a great TED Talk just from that in terms of the content. But near the end of it, Pete, she starts sharing why this is so meaningful to her, this ability to change how you feel. And she shares how she was in a very terrible car accident. And when she woke up, she had a significant head injury that impacted her IQ. She had very much identified herself as being a smart person, and then about how she ends up getting to college and kind of turns things around. So anyway, if you want to just play this clip, Sure. We can see how she really engages the audience through this personal story and through emotion.
Eventually, I graduated from college. It took me 4 years longer than my peers. And I convinced someone, my angel advisor, Susan Fisk, to take me on. And so I ended up at Princeton, and I was like, I am not supposed to be here. I am an imposter. And the night before my first year talk, and the first year talk at Princeton is a 20-minute talk to 20 people. That's it. I was so afraid of being found out the next day that I called her and said, I'm quitting. She was like, "You are not quitting because I took a gamble on you and you're staying. You're going to stay, and this is what you're going to do. You're going to fake it. You're going to do every talk that you ever get asked to do. You're just going to do it and do it and do it, even if you're terrified and just paralyzed and having an out-of-body experience until you have this moment where you say, oh my gosh, I'm doing it. Like, I have become this. I am actually doing this." So that's what I did. 5 years in grad school. A few years, I'm at Northwestern. I moved to Harvard. I'm at Harvard. I'm not really thinking about it anymore, but for a long time I had been thinking, not supposed to be here, not supposed to be here. So at the end of my first year at Harvard, a student who had not talked in class the entire semester, who I had said, look, you got to participate or else you're going to fail, came into my office. I really didn't know her at all. And she came in totally defeated, and she said, "I'm not supposed to be here." And that was the moment for me, because two things happened. One was that I realized, oh my gosh, I don't feel like that anymore. I don't feel that anymore, but she does, and I get that feeling. And the second was, she is supposed to be here. Like, she can fake it. She can become it. So I was like, yes, you are. You are supposed to be here, and tomorrow you're going to fake it. You're going to make yourself powerful, and, you're going to...
Okay, there's so many things that I love about that in how it shows that when you're real and when you're really bearing yourself to your audience, that they are with you. The way that that audience clapped for her when she got through that story, that your audience, for the most part, they're rooting for you. And by the way, she got a standing ovation at the very end of that. But she was able to tell us why this was so important to us. And you could tell, like, there was a point, if you watch the video, there's a point where she can't speak because she's trying to get control of that emotion. But she does, and it just made her point that much more powerful, and you saw how the audience responded to that.
It is a beautiful example of that. Just her ability to connect with the audience in a real and authentic way. I think it is really powerful. Can we look at I don't know if I want to characterize this as a non-example, but maybe a counterexample. I want to get your thoughts on Elon Musk. Now, you know who Elon Musk is. Yep. Okay. Elon Musk is CEO of Tesla. He's our very own Tony Stark. He's an inventor, impresario, and sort of he is the guy who is missing whatever it is that many of us have in our brains that tell us, hey, that's a crazy idea. You should not do that. He's missing that gene. He says, that's a crazy idea. I think I'm going to do it and do it all. And so here's Elon Musk debuting the Powerwall in a keynote speech last week.
What we're here to talk about is the solution. I actually think it's really a fairly obvious solution, but it's something that we need to do. And the solution is in two parts. Part one, the sun. we have this handy fusion reactor in the sky called the sun. Okay? You don't have to do anything. It just works. Shows up every day and produces ridiculous amounts of power. Okay? Now, a lot of people aren't clear on how much surface area is needed to generate enough power to completely get the United States off of fossil fuels. Most people have no idea. They think that it must be some huge amount of area, like maybe you need these satellites in space and like space solar power. If anyone should be in favor of space solar power, it should be me. But this is completely unnecessary because actually very little land is needed to get rid of all fossil fuel electricity generation in the United States. That blue square there is the land area that's needed to transition the United States to a zero carbon electricity situation. Really
Did you find yourself having that same experience that you had with Amy Cuddy while listening to Elon Musk just now?
I had a little bit of a different experience, and I've heard. I think I've heard this one before. And first of all, I think there's a difference between when you see someone live, and when you see someone and you can see their face, and when you're just hearing a clip. And I think I bet he was extraordinary live. And when I saw the clip of it, he has a really great, engaging face that really kind of brings the audience in. I initially had this kind of reaction to that giggle that he did, where it was a little bit unsettling to me.
Right.
But upon reflection, Pete, what he brings, which is a great, great thing for people to bring, so this is kind of an example and a non-example, is the passion.
Right. And I think that really gets to it for me too. And I was surprised when I started reading headlines, this from The Verge, the day it was that he delivered it, which was just on May 1st. I mean, it was just a couple of weeks ago. Watch Elon Musk announce Tesla Energy in the best tech keynote I have ever seen, from the editorialist T.C. Sotek. I thought that headline at first watch was a bit over the top. I've seen a lot of tech keynotes, and this one didn't strike me as particularly powerful for a few reasons. One, he feels very awkward on stage. He doesn't feel like he's terribly comfortable on stage, but part of his gift is his ability to turn that awkwardness into affinity or affability. Like, we sort of like him like we like Kermit the Frog when Kermit is struggling with something. There's a gentleness or a softness that he brings to his sense of kind of stage awkwardness. But what also comes through is his confidence. He is dead sure that this is the right solution for our power problems. And what you don't see at the end, the little blue speck he's talking about, is a little dot on a map of the United States that's right in the middle of the United States, right at the tip of Texas. And it's a very, very small dot. And he's sort of illustrating the scope of what he's trying to capture and what it would require of this country. And it is, in his mind, the way he's presenting it, there is no other answer than what he is presenting on stage. And I think that ends up being a powerful kind of skill that he is bringing to his presentation, as awkward as his sort of cadence becomes.
Yes, and I think that's it. That's what I was thinking. As I said, the passion, the belief in what he's saying, and he makes the audience believe it too. And I bet also being there live goes back to that virality thing that you spoke of at the beginning of the show, where I'm sure there was the collective energy of watching him and hearing what he was talking about and the potential impact of what he was talking to really added to that experience. But I do also think he has kind of an endearing, a Kermit quality and a really endearing quality, and he's very, very authentic. And I think that gives all of us kind of something to feel good about, that, when we watch these spectacular keynotes and we take some tips away from them, we may say, oh gosh, but I'm not like that person. You don't have to be like that person. What you really have to be is the best version of yourself. And I think that's what he brought to that presentation. I think that's probably why he got the feedback that he did.
I think so too. It's the power of being able to tell your own story, and I think that's a really wonderful one. I had just one more clip on that front, and I'm interested in getting your take on that. That is from the good John Green, author of Fault in Our Stars and Paper Town. He is one of the co-founders of the Nerd Fighters. He is and one of the Vlog brothers. If you're not familiar with YouTube, he and his brother, scientist Hank Green, they send videos to each other through YouTube every Tuesday and Friday, and sometimes they're educating on the economy of some sub-Saharan nation, and sometimes they're talking about, they're doing strange athletic events against one another at a family reunion. But either way, they have done an incredible job at building a community through story. And here is just a little bit of John Green on stage at TEDx Indianapolis.
Zay isn't just a great public intellectual, he's also a brilliant community builder, and the community of people that built up around these videos was in many ways a community of learners. So we played Zay Frank at chess collaboratively, and we beat him. We organized ourselves to take a young man on a road trip across the United States. We turned the earth into a sandwich by having one person hold a piece of bread at one point on the earth, and on the exact opposite point of the earth have another person holding a piece of bread. I realize that these are silly ideas, but they are also learny ideas. And that was what was so exciting to me. And if you go online, you can find communities like this all over the place. Follow the calculus tag on Tumblr, and yes, you will see people complaining about calculus, but you'll also see people reblogging those complaints, making the argument that calculus is interesting and beautiful, and here's a way into thinking about the problem that you find unsolvable. You can go to places like Reddit and find subreddits like Ask a Historian or Ask Science, where you can ask people who are in these fields a wide range of questions, from very serious ones to very silly ones. But to me, the most interesting communities of learners that are growing up on the internet right now are on YouTube, and admittedly, I am biased.
One of the things I like so much about John Green is that he is cool in an internet era. He is a nerd, and he celebrates education and intelligence in a way that I think we are seeing is rather divisive these days. But what I love about his presentation style and the rather rapid kind of cadence that he brings to the table is that, his speaking style alone is engaging. It brings you into the power of his story. It makes you think about the really crazy thing that he just said a few seconds ago, but has now moved on from. The idea of having a piece of bread on one side of the planet and another piece on the other side. For many of I think our audience even might find that a rather ridiculous exercise, but you have to remember he did this by engaging thousands, tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of people through his stories on his YouTube channel. And that is a really powerful communication skill.
Yeah, you can tell that he's a storyteller.
Yeah.
And I agree with you about the cadence of his voice. Sometimes people who speak quickly, it's hard to understand them. Or you even find that it's a show of nervousness, that as people get nervous throughout their presentation, their voice gets faster and faster, and their breath gets faster and faster, or shallower. But that's not the case with him. That sounds very natural and kind of part of the story. Part of, you follow along. You go and see the bouncing ball to the cadence of his voice. Yeah, I thought that was terrific, Pete.
What? Let's look at some. Let's talk a little bit about enthusiasm.
I'm just laughing thinking about some of the clips we have about enthusiasm. And enthusiasm it's so important, and I think that the three clips that we've showed or that we've listened to so far show the speaker's enthusiasm about their topic, but they're unique in how they display it. But regardless of how you display enthusiasm, you do want to bring it with you. You don't want to be that Bueller, anyone. You don't want to be that person, but it has to be real to you, and you want to be careful that maybe it's not too much you.
Yeah, right. This is, I think that's the key point for me, is that your energy, we have this thing around our house where, when the kids, interrupt or do something crazy in the middle of a kind of inappropriate situation, we always step back and say, okay, read the room, guys. Read the room, that. Right? And so my 8-year-old is like, he does one of two things. He's either reading the room or he puts his fist up like J.K. Simmons does in Whiplash. He says, okay, not my tempo. Right? So that's a really important lesson. And I think we have two clips here that really demonstrate, that the art of reading the room. Shall we start with the political one or the motivational one?
Oh, let's start with the political one.
All right, political one. It's a quickie.
Yeah, it's
well, you guys, you have already got the picture here. I was about to say, I'm sure there's some disappointed people here. You know what? You know something? If you had told us 1 year ago that we were going to come in third in Iowa, we would have given anything for that. And you know something? Not only are we going to New Hampshire, Tom Harkin, we're going to South Carolina and Oklahoma and Arizona and North Dakota and New Mexico. We're going to California and Texas and New York. And we're going to South Dakota and Oregon and Washington and Michigan. And then we're going to Washington, D.C. to take back the White House. Yeah!
obviously, that was Howard Dean speaking to a caucus in Iowa. And that there at the very end was the scream that sank a campaign.
Yeah, I had a couple of thoughts about that one, Pete. First of all, I was starting to get anxious as as his voice was getting louder and louder about the different states. First of all, I'm thinking, is he going to say them all? What if he forgets someone? Because that's what I would do. I would get to 48. And what about the two you forget?
Right.
But I think he was almost okay.
Yes.
It was almost okay. And then just, went right over the line.
That's right. That's when enthusiasm got the better of him. I actually really like the sort of list of states. I like the way he engaged Tom Harkin. I like the excitement and enthusiasm, and he's really with the crowd. And in that case, he's really reading the room. And then he has the scream. And I personally don't have much of a problem with it. But now listening to it with the benefit of hindsight, it's it falls out of cadence. It falls out of the story, and it brings us out of the story. It feels like he's hurt himself a little bit, and I can see how that changed the tone, because it gave people something else to focus on besides the message.
Right. And, I say so many times to people, the audience is rooting for you. The audience is rooting for you. In politics, let's face it, they're really not.
They're really not, yeah.
So they're looking for that slip up. But
I wonder if we could look at some of the experiences that you've had specifically at NACUBO, though, in this kind of frame of reference. What are some of the really great experiences that you've seen on the NACUBO stage?
I have to say, Allison Levine, last year's NACUBO, one of the keynote speakers, remains one of my all-time favorites.
Why is that?
And I think it was so many things, Pete. Some of it is about what you said in terms of how her content, I reflect on it to this day. There are things that I'll do, and she pops into my head in terms of being inspiring, and how I can live my life in a different way. For those of you who don't know who Allison Levine is, she is a woman who has climbed many mountains, Mount Everest being one of them. And so she is now a motivational speaker, and she talked about her experiences in terms of preparing and climbing Mount Everest, and tied them into how we live our personal lives, or how we function at work. And it really, really resonated with me, the content. And then also, because anytime I see a presentation, I'm also looking for tips or how they delivered well, or how they used movement, or what have you. And Allison is a small person. She's of a very small stature, and a keynote stage is very big. And I got to tell you, she rocked it. She owned that stage piece, Pete. The way she moved about it, she came across as a very as a huge presence on a huge stage, and she is a small person. So that is one of the ones that I love.
You got me thinking about one that I think was really powerful. And when I was in college, I had the great benefit of seeing Arthur Miller speak. Arthur Miller is obviously a playwright, author, wrote Death of a Salesman, and he came to the theater school where I was attending college and spoke. And one of the things that I thought was so powerful about Arthur Miller, and he didn't move a lot, but he was an older guy. I mean, he pretty much sat on stage in a black box. So we didn't get that benefit of movement, but what we did get was the benefit of experience. And one of the things that he did was wrap up his take on the theater and his take on current events in a way that so brilliantly connected to his past and to our cultural past, to living through the Depression and to living through that massive cultural change, post World War II, as he was struggling in New York to figure out how to make a living, and these soldiers are coming home from the war by the millions. It was an unbelievable experience that allowed me to really resonate in my present with his history. And I think his ability to make that connection for me from the stage was an incredibly powerful lesson. Use your history, use your experience to make your presentation that much more powerful.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Pete. Take us beyond the facts and figures, and how do these things impact you personally? What are your personal insights? How can you personally connect it to yourself, and then so that I can personally connect it to me?
Right.
Yeah, that's a good one.
We have one more clip before we as we wrap up. Do you want to talk about Rick Elias?
Yes, this is one of those, again, really impacted me personally. He was on the flight number escapes me because it was kind of seared in our brains when it happened. The
1549.
Flight, there you go. I knew you'd know, Pete. Captain Scully's flight, right?
Right.
Or Sully, excuse me. The flight that landed in the Hudson River. And so Rick is at a TED, and it's just a 5-minute. The whole thing is only 5 minutes. We won't play you the whole thing, but it tells us what he learned from being on that plane and thinking he was going to die. And so it's the 3 things that he learned when his plane crashed.
Well, I had a unique seat that day. I was sitting in 1D. I was the only one who could talk to the flight attendants. So I looked at them right away, and they said, no problem. We probably hit some birds. The pilot had already turned the plane around, and we weren't that far. You could see Manhattan. 2 minutes later, 3 things happen at the same time. The pilot lines up the plane with the Hudson River. It's usually not the route. He turns off the engines. Now imagine being on a plane with no sound. And then he says 3 words, as unemotional 3 words as I've ever heard. He says, brace for impact. I didn't have to talk to the flight attendant anymore. I could see in her eyes, it was terror. Life was over. And I want to share with you 3 things I learned about myself that day. I learned that it all changes in an instant. We have this bucket list, we have these things we want to do in life, and I thought about all the people I wanted to reach out that I didn't, all the fences I wanted to mend, all the experiences I wanted to have and I never did. As I thought about that, later on I came up with a saying, which is, I collect bad wines.
What's your reaction to that, Pete?
Well, it's an incredibly powerful story that he is telling, and it really strikes a chord because we have all experienced, many of us have experienced air travel, and I certainly have experienced that feeling of, oh my goodness, that turbulence is going to lead to something worse. Like I'm not a great flyer, but when he says brace for impact and holds on that beat, that is my heart skips a beat.
Yes, I've heard this clip so many times because I love it and I find it very inspiring. And every time I hear that, my heart kind of stops and my breath stops, and I know he's okay. He's telling the story.
He's standing right there. He made it. We know how this ends.
But I am right there in the moment with him. And it's also like I thought his use of pause. It's just a really great way to tell the story, but he's also managing to tell it in also kind of a funny way, because you notice how the audience laughs. I never laugh when I listen to it, but I wonder if it's almost like there's so much tension as they're hearing him that then they all laugh at certain points. But
isn't that a lesson in itself, right? I mean, he builds up the tension with this story and then leaves long enough beats that you're not sure what to do. When he says, and the pilot lines up with the Hudson River, it's not usually the route. What do you do then but laugh? Like there's no it's empty silence, and it ends up making for a really nice moment that breaks that tension and allows you to not to get too overwhelmed in what is otherwise could be a really terrifying story.
Right. Do we have time for me to just tell a real quick story about when you said breaking the tension? It reminded me of it.
Sure.
It also relates to the idea that we can plan and practice and be all ready for our presentation. And there are things that are beyond our control. And I recently was at the NACUBO workshop, and it was the last session of the day. And it was the president, Kurt Steinberg from the Mass College of Art and Design. And he was doing, great talk. Everything was fine. And in the room next door, Pete, it was crazy. I've never heard anything like it.
Like a party or
Mardi
Gras?
Yes, like Mardi Gras. Thank you. That's the description. Or like a revival or something where there were people singing, they were cheering, they were dancing. It was outrageous. And so we're all kind of sitting there as he's continuing this presentation, and we're all kind of looking at each other, and next door's getting louder and louder, and nobody really knows what to do, and it was really kind of tense. And all of a sudden he just stopped and he looked towards the wall and he said something to the effect of like, well, I don't think I'm going to get that kind of reaction when I'm done. And it was so funny. And we all just laughed. And the tension was broken. We were all now on the same side. We were rooting for him. We gave him a standing ovation at the end. It was the best recovery, the best dealing with stuff you can't control that I've seen. So I just wanted to slip that one in there as well.
Well, that is a fine example of breaking the old tension. This has been a good conversation. I think we covered some really good points: use of movement, breaking tension, use of enthusiasm, reading the room, using your body and using your stories, your personal experience, to make your present experience that much more powerful. We are going to be posting, we'll post links to all of these clips in the show notes at TibleLink.com, along with, let's see, we have some other, one other article that you posted here in our show notes, delivery tips from TED, written tips from the TED speaker coaches, which we'll post in there. Do you have any setup commentary before we say goodbye?
I don't think so, Pete. I've enjoyed this. This is my third podcast with you, right, Pete?
Yes, it is.
So is it when I do 6, I get the steak knives? When do I get those?
Yeah,
I was promised steak knives.
You were promised steak knives. That's right. Well, it's yes. I'm sure we have a process for that. I'm sure. I'm sure somebody has a process.
Sort of form.
I think there's a form, and there's a do not reply email address. You'll get a note from the gift administrator.
Excellent.
Yes.
All right,
thank you so much, Gail Gregory, for joining the show, and I'm hoping that 3 is just the start of many, many more.
Me too.
All
Me
right.
too.
Thanks everybody for downloading and listening, and again, make sure to find us at TibleLink.com. Search for and download the show. Subscribe for free in iTunes, and make sure you don't miss a single episode, because you never know when a gem like this very show is just going to show up, and it may just pass you by if you're not subscribing. So thanks everybody. We'll catch you next week on Navigating Change.